All right, so we are going to break down the executive order that was put out yesterday, which was January 20th, 2025, Inauguration Day. And this one is defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. Now, it's important to remember that just because you are excited about the headline, you may be excited, who knows? There's a lot of things that tend to be buried in these and get pushed through that you might not be excited about. But anyway, let's dive in. And I'm going to go through these and make them like easy to understand, because parts of executive orders and just government mumbo jumbo is the fact that they make it purposefully weird and difficult to understand. Okay. All right, let's go. So the key point of this specific executive order, it's basically claiming that recognizing gender identity undermines rights and dignities and safety of women by simply allowing trans women to enter their space, essentially. It also argues that by replacing biological sex with gender identity, it undermines science somehow. But also, as you read through this, you'll realize that there was not a lot of science used in this. Like, they use big cell and little cell in place of using the words egg and sperm. So depending on how you feel about science there. All right, so policy and definitions. The government will officially recognize only two sexes, male and female, as determined at conception. And this is what I was talking to you about kind of burying things. This specific executive order actually grants personhood to fetuses because of the way they word it here. So it defines female as a person whose sex at conception produces a large reproductive cell. We just talked about that. Eggs. We can say that. It's okay. And the male as one whose sex at conception produces small reproductive cells. Sperm. We're adults. Sperm. Which is also funny because by that definition, every male on this entire planet is technically trans by that definition, because you technically don't get this characteristic until many weeks into the pregnancy and development. Like the gonads that separate male from female that would produce that don't actually show up until much later. So those definitions are scientifically incorrect. And again, that definition, by using the word person, grants a fetus personhood, which can then be used to defend other executive orders that may be put out in terms of abortion later on. It also rejects gender identity as a legitimate concept, calling it subjective and unscientific. Okay. So guidelines for federal agencies. Federal agencies are going to align all policies, documents, and practices with these biological definitions. Government-issued IDs must match the gender, sex assigned at birth. And it removes references to gender identity from every single piece of federal communications and funding. As of today, Trump put out a memo that said anyone that works in DEI in the federal government is going to be on leave and ultimately laid off, and any programming for DEI is also being removed. So that has to do with this as well. Privacy and intimate spaces. It ensures males are not going to be housed in women's prison shelters or other single-sex spaces. Basically, if you are a trans woman, this is basically saying that they will put you in a male prison, essentially, which is extremely dangerous. Okay, and then this needs to be implemented with 120 days. All practice must align. It completely rescinds any executive order that supports gender identity as a legal concept. So anything that did exist in terms of protections for trans women, out the door, protections for gender identity, gone. And this explicitly repeals policies included gender identity as a protected category under federal law. Now, it's important to remember that this is going to face a lot of scrutiny. There's already lawsuits being filed everywhere. So we'll see if this holds up, or if some of it holds up. But that is happening. Now, I'm going to go through a couple different political perspectives on this because I think that's important. We're going to have a right-leaning explanation, a left-leaning, and then a centrist because I think that's important. So for the right, this order really defends women's rights and spaces by ensuring policies are based on biological facts rather than subjective identities. It acknowledges the biological distinction between male and female from conception, providing clarity in laws and federal policies. And the personhood language reinforces traditional views on life and identity. This is how the right, probably the far right, feels about this. But I just want to summarize it that way for you. So the left-leaning critics are going to argue this is in order to marginalize transgender individuals, specifically trans women, and removes protections for gender-diverse communities. It grants personhood to a fetus through its definitions of male and female conception, and it sets a precedent that's going to impact reproductive rights. And I mean, it just sets them up. The elimination of gender identity from federal policies reduces inclusivity and creates potential harm for vulnerable populations. And then just straight in the middle. This order represents a significant policy shift, aiming to balance the protections of women spaces with clear biological definitions. Supporters may see it as a necessary clarification, but opponents could definitely view it as exclusionary and overly rigid. And the inclusion of fetal personhood language introduces broader implications, and there are going to be debates there. There is definitely a middle ground here, and it's interesting, by trying to define this at the federal level, it almost null and voids the argument people have said that gender and sex are not a social construct, because they are now making it a social construct on paper, literally, by defining it this way. But anyway, I hope this helps. I hope it breaks it down for you a little bit more. I'm going to do more of these, actually go through every single one that's coming out. It's going to take me some time, but I'm going to try and put it into real people speak, because God knows they make no sense. But anyway, also subscribe. I would appreciate that. And I'll see you soon.